The politics behind Pope Francis's Cuba visit are inescapable. He's met with Fidel Castro, he's met with Raúl, he's not met with dissidents. Several tried but were detained by state security. All these are signs of the thin diplomatic line Francis is walking in Cuba, where he also wants to expand the role of the Church. But to see his visit to Cuba and subsequent trip to the US only through a political prism is to miss the point. Francis wants to challenge people across the political spectrum. Thus, on Sunday, at Mass in Havana's Plaza de la Revolución, we heard him say this:
Por eso nunca el servicio es ideológico, ya que no se sirve a ideas, sino que se sirve a personas.
A veiled criticism, perhaps, of the stifling rule of Cuba's Communist Party. But he also warned of being tempted by an idea of service that is self-serving. A veiled criticism also, perhaps, of capitalism. Pope Francis also seeks reconciliation and to break down walls between people, using unusual words to do so. Most obviously between those at war, he begged the world to support Colombia's peace process, and particularly between the rich and poor. So in Havana he talked of wealth creation in a novel way. We always try to curtail poverty, he said. That's a reasonable thing, but I'm talking about the heart. Moreover, Francis critiques with humour. Again in Havana he rounded on, of all people, nuns. In his own words, may God spare us grey nuns, those who are always lamenting things. Saint Teresa used to say that to her nuns, woe to that nun. Francis seeks change. But true and lasting change is always a long game, everywhere. Cuba is certainly a long game, and that is the US's new approach to the island as well. Washington, which further relaxed regulations last week, hopes that while expanding tourism and trade will not produce change in Cuba overnight, it encourages the possibility further down the road. It will do this by working on society's substratum. Pope Francis, as the Vatican has always done, plays a long game too, only in humanity's substratum. That is especially so in Cuba, home of one of the most charismatic but also most divisive political events of the 20th century, and one that has left its people exhausted and its economy in tatters. On this subject, Francis's words were perhaps most pertinent and accurate, yet also filled with hope and magnanimity.
El santo pueblo fiel de Dios que camina en Cuba es un pueblo que tiene gusto por la fiesta, por la amistad, por las cosas bellas. Es un pueblo que camina, que canta y alaba. Es un pueblo que tiene heridas como todo pueblo, pero que sabe estar con los brazos abiertos, que marcha con esperanza porque su vocación es de grandeza.
That last word, grandeur, is significant. It carries a promise of hope, and it echoes John Paul II's call during his own historic 1998 island visit when he said, "Be not afraid, may the world open to Cuba, and may Cuba open to the world." Almost 20 years later, the fruits of those words, which transcend politics, even though they are so very political too, like Pope Francis's, are starting to be felt. John Paul Rathbone, Financial Times, London.